It truly is fantastic to be here in Houston and speaking to you tonight. I'm often asked, what is the entrepreneurial instinct? It's the mental toughness that allows you to make something from nothing. And given the times that we face, it's an important skill not just for entrepreneurs, but for anyone who's trying to find their way with their career, with their family, and find financial success. It's the mindset that allows you to take smart risks, thrive in ambiguity, and pick yourself up after failure. It's why the team that looks good on paper doesn't always win, and why the dropout sometimes becomes a billionaire. And we hear that story over and over again. It's amazing because it's available to all of us. Your instinct doesn't care what your IQ is, where you went to school, or how many years of experience that you have. And from example, we've seen people who've been able to use this instinct to trump Ivy League educations and experience to find tremendous success. And so my discussion about instinct tonight actually starts with Rita and Sunil. Rita and Sunil were two budding entrepreneurs who came to this country in 1980. Sunil was the captain of a merchant marine ship, and he used to sail around with his family until his kids got to an age where they just couldn't sail around and be together anymore, and he had to find a completely new line of work. And so he took half of his life savings and bought up a bunch of Indian handicrafts, a whole container full, and decided he's going to move his family to the USA. Hey, it's the land of opportunity, right? So they came here in 1980 and didn't know a soul. And new to the country, they didn't have a credit score. And so even little things like finding an apartment were difficult. They'd fill out credit applications at the apartments and basically get shown the door. And they only found a place when the owner of a smaller building actually took the time to get to know them. And he was a former seaman himself and decided to cut these guys a break. And he gave them a bed and chairs too. And they had nothing at the time. And so finally, with this little apartment, Sunil called for that container, and all these boxes came, and they stuffed those boxes all over that tiny apartment. They put tablecloths on some of them, and those became their tables. And he went out, and he tried to find customers. He had no plan whatsoever other than to knock on doors to see if anyone would take his handicrafts and wares. And in the beginning, no one would. And so when no stores would give him a chance, he decided, I should open up my own store. And so he started checking out shopping centers all over the city, looking for a landlord who would, again, cut him a break. Again, with no history, no one would cut him a break. And so within a month of looking for retail locations, he decided he needed to get another job because he needed to bring income in. And so the only job he could find was actually as a ship surveyor that paid half of what he made as a ship's captain. Wasn't what he had in mind when he moved here, but he took the job. And so months passed, and with time, they found a place to live, they bought a new home, and with all of this came a sense of belonging. And while he would survey ships during the day, he never lost sight of what he really wanted to do, and he would scout locations for that retail store that he wanted in all of his off time. And a year later, he found a restaurant space, which he converted himself into a gift store. And when he opened the store, first month's sales topped $35,000. And the second month, sales were even higher. And the third month, sales fell off a cliff. And from their empty store, they would look out into the mall and see people walking around with shopping bags filled with clothes. And Rita decided, we need clothes in our store. And so the couple took a buying trip to New York and bought up a bunch of clothing and filled half their store up with clothes. So you've got antiques and handicrafts on one side, clothes on the other side. And sales picked back up again. And so as the success of their store moved on, they looked for a second location. And in that second location, they were located right next to a jewelry store. And watching that jewelry store, they learned the jewelry business. And within a couple of years, they were opening a new retail store every few months. And by the early 1990s, they had 16 stores and 45 employees. And they did just about everything themselves. When they needed a warehouse, they started to attend foreclosure auctions and while they were at foreclosure auctions, they'd find tracts of land and little shopping centers, and they'd get to work on those buildings themselves and turn some of them over and make a nice little profit doing that. And when the recession started to eat into their store margins, they decided to open up their own wholesaling operation. And before they knew it, Rita found out that she actually had a knack for designing the clothing that she'd been buying all of these years. And within a couple of years, their clothing was in Macy's and Saks and Bloomingdale's and hundreds of stores around the country. And so over the course of 30 years, a tiny gift shop turned into a retail chain, which inspired a wholesaling business, which led rise to an investment company that made Rita and Sunil millionaires many times over. Rita and Sunil's story is the real story of American entrepreneurship. They didn't write business plans, they didn't go to business school, they didn't chase venture capital, but they did everything by learning along the way. They watched their customers closely, and they watched their competitors closely. And it's not just Rita and Sunil, and it's not just immigrants, but plenty of entrepreneurs that found success in America found it using instinct, not only foregoing rhyme and reason, but basic planning altogether. You've got Tom Monahan, the founder of Domino's Pizza. He was a dropout, and he bought a pizza outlet with his brother. His only previous food experience was as a soda jerk and a busboy. Howard Schultz, if he'd done any kind of market research at all, he would have never bought the original Starbucks location because coffee consumption had been declining for 2 decades before he did so. Anita Roddick started the Body Shop without any training or experience. It was sheer necessity that drove her to start the business after her husband left, leaving her to take care of her children. No one ever talks about entrepreneurship as survival, but that's exactly what it was for her. Richard Branson was a high school dropout. He started one odd business after the other, everything from selling Christmas trees to a magazine, and then he started publishing ads in his magazine for mail order records, and all of a sudden checks just started coming in, and Virgin Music was born. And this guy, he bought a failing general store with just 18 months of retail experience under his belt. He bought that store directly across the street from a bustling competitor, and many people at the time thought his purchase was a huge mistake. Turns out Sam Walton did just fine. Self-made success is no accident. And I know Rita and Sunil's story very well. I actually lived on that ship, and their boxes of inventory lined my home. And watching them, I knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur too. And I thought, hey, I'm smart, I get good grades, I can one-up my parents, I have so many more resources at my disposal. So I focused on getting those straight A's. I went to the Ivy League school. While I was there, I took every class in entrepreneurship that they offered and counseled hundreds of businesses on preparing business plans and getting loans. And when I finished school, I got the consulting and venture capital jobs that all my friends were clawing for. And on paper, I had everything it takes, but in reality, I was stalled. I didn't have remotely the entrepreneurial prowess that my parents had, and I had all the training in the world. And that's what led me to understand, what is it about self-made success? What is it about some people who seem to be able to make something from nothing using instinct? And that's what made me want to return to instinct. And so I started doing what came natural to me, which is picking up the phone, and I started talking to self-made entrepreneurs just like my parents, who basically were more action-oriented, didn't necessarily write a business plan, didn't go to business school. And after about 24 conversations, I saw huge similarities among them. They had traits, personality traits that were repeated over and over again of optimism, confidence, the ability to be problem solvers. They also had a way of approaching risk and talking about risk that was very unique. And then out of sheer coincidence, I was introduced to researchers of neuroscience and behavioral psychology that really helped me connect the dots and introduced me to research that had never been on my radar. Self-made success is no accident, it's chemistry. The entrepreneurs that buck convention follow a framework. It's just nothing like the framework that most of us have been encouraged to pursue by friends, teachers, parents, and society at large. It's independent of special degrees, sophisticated planning, or access to capital. Whether it was necessity, ignorance, sheer stubbornness, they found success by doing what comes natural to them, and that's what makes it so powerful. The idea that we're born knowing what we need to know to handle the greatest challenges in life is a theme that runs through Eastern and Western culture and in major myths, religious texts, and popular stories of our time. Our heroes, whether they be Moses or Buddha or Ulysses or Harry Potter or Dorothy, all set off on a journey facing extraordinary obstacles, only to realize that what they need to overcome their obstacles has always been available to them. And the object of their desire is within their reach from the start. But our conditioning starts very early in life, so early that we don't even know what's happening. Teachers, parents strive to guide us down a socially acceptable path, and then our nature, our true nature, goes into hiding, and we become what we're conditioned to be, and that's when we become trapped. Discovering your instinct means to stop doing what's best and to start listening to your inner nature. Some people know how to use their instinct, they're just born knowing. Others are placed in situations where they're forced to draw upon it, and for the rest of us, instinct comes from discovery and practice. And as we learn how we're wired, we gain a better understanding of how to use our physiology and our strengths and our innate capability to do for ourselves and to rely less on an outside world that asks us to prove ourselves over and over again. So I'm here to talk to you about your entrepreneurial instinct. And the purpose here today is to talk about how our mind, behavior, and brain chemistry impacts our actions, particularly our ability to take risks and handle the unknown. And boy, are there a lot of unknowns today. And so tonight we're going to do this in 3 steps. We're going to talk about natural risk takers and focus on what gives these people the ability to take risks. And by examining what gives them that ability, we're hoping to learn a little bit more about ourselves and our own wiring. And our second step will be to talk about the science behind fear and motivation. Doesn't matter who you are, our wiring works the same way. So while some people are born knowing how to take those risks, if you understand how your own wiring works, you can set yourself up for success. And finally, we're going to talk about everyday, easy ways for you to make the most of your behavior and brain chemistry. For most people, risk is a 4-letter word. If you ask a psychiatrist, a priest, or even your mother what they think of risk, be prepared for the same unimaginative responses. Risks are bad. People who take risks are deviants. They wear leather jackets. You'll probably find them at a bar somewhere in a brawl. And if they have jobs, they're coming to work with black eyes. Risks are to be avoided at all costs. But the truth is, some risks can be very rewarding. And your ability to be the next Steve Jobs is determined in large part by your comfort with risky decisions. For aspiring entrepreneurs that are watching from the sidelines, taking cues from those who know how to take gambles with ease holds the key to getting in the game. And science has come a very long way in helping us understand what makes some naturally gifted risk takers. In 2008, researchers at Cambridge University conducted a battery of tests on entrepreneurs and corporate managers. They collected a group of business professionals who had equivalent IQ and equal years of experience in corporate fields. And they gave them a battery of science tests, wiring up their brains with fMRI scans, and behavioral tests. And they found some very interesting things. Both groups performed equally when it came to basic decision-making processes, meaning let's give them some information, let's have them answer some questions. They performed exactly the same. But when it came to dealing with questions of upside and downside gain, the entrepreneurs overwhelmingly took riskier bets. Not only did they take riskier bets, but the researchers noticed a chemical activity taking place in a side of the brain, the reward pathway, that was not taking place with the corporate managers. Also, on tests that measure cognitive flexibility or just basic adaptability, the entrepreneurs scored higher. So in other words, looking at all of this information, the entrepreneurs not only are good at risk-taking, it's what separates them as a group from other equally experienced and smart individuals. And that edge is not connected to your IQ, pedigree, or years of experience, but there is a defined link to physiology. Specifically, the chemical release that these entrepreneurs were experiencing is linked to impulsivity. In business, impulsivity becomes a bias to action. Left to your own devices, impulsivity can be terrible. Impulses can make you do all sorts of awful things, addiction, driving yourself off a cliff. But what the researchers found is that when you combine this impulsivity with adaptability, which is deeply connected to your personality, it becomes a winning formula for being able to take risks for gain. So whether you're born an entrepreneurial risk taker or made to be one, your brain processes motivation in the face of the unknown the exact same way. And the key to becoming a better risk taker for those of us who aren't wired this way is to understand our own wiring and how the brain processes motivation in the face of fear and failure. We're all regulated by a traffic light in our brain, and depending on whether that light shines green or red, you'll charge forward or you'll stay parked at the intersection when it comes to taking a risk. And for entrepreneurs that were studied at the Cambridge University study, their light flashes green, they're on go. They've got a bias to action, and they're carrying around buckets of water to dump on all the fires that they see along the way. But for those who hesitate in the face of risk and ambiguity, the light flashes red. They're focused on what can go wrong and what they have to lose. And like any traffic light, it can't be red and green at once. For most of us, it's a knee-jerk reaction to experience a fear of loss or loss aversion when we face any kind of ambiguity, fear, any kind of situation where we're experiencing failure. And you know what? That loss aversion served us well for a long time. Back when there were dinosaurs, we needed that loss aversion to run away from dinosaurs, otherwise we would have been woolly mammoth food. But it can really get in the way when you're in your professional career and you're facing ambiguity on a regular basis, particularly with entrepreneurs. When you sign up to be an entrepreneur, the road is not only not straight, it's curvy with potholes and twists and bends all over the place. And the reason that loss aversion is so difficult for us to get over is that fear is powerful. In fact, fear is actually 2.5 times more powerful than greed. The psychologist from Princeton that discovered this fact won the Nobel Prize in 2002. And most of us are trained to deal with risks by making lists and thinking about everything that can go wrong. But that contingency planning is known to only make that red light shine brighter and make you more deeply rooted in loss aversion. So a lot of the techniques that we learn to cope with risks make us unable to take them, even smart risks. And the key to turning off the fear is to activate the reward side of the brain. And this is what we're calling the green light. When entrepreneurs are taking risks, it's this side of the brain that's lighting up. It's this side of the brain that's experiencing a chemical release. And that chemical release makes them focus, makes them experience pleasure, makes them want to re-experience that promotion, which propels them and motivates them to move forward. Again, that's that bias to action we talked about earlier. And the loss and reward side of the brain, while they're independent of each other, they can't both be on at the same time. So for those of us who are here today trying to understand how can we become better risk takers, the key is to know that loss aversion is real. That red light is where the light starts for most of us. And if you want to get on the path to taking rewarding risks, You have to learn how to shut off that red light to turn on the green light and charge towards your future. So while some people are born with the ability to just be wired to take action, for the rest of us, there's a lot of everyday ways that we can actually use our behavior and brain chemistry to be better risk takers, to activate that side of the brain that feels reward, feels motivation, and learns. And it's very important to understand that that equation we talked about earlier, the impulsivity plus adaptability equals reward-oriented risk taker, it's all available to all of us. Some very basic techniques that you can use that can cause that same chemical release in the reward center of the brain starts with understanding motivation and what motivates you. Focusing on a passion, money. For some people, it's altruism. It's understanding what it is that drives you to get up and take steps and take action when the road is twisting, turning, and full of potholes. And again, it's not always just the good stuff. For some people, that motivation can come from anger, spite, revenge. They're all very powerful motivators. But you need to find out what matters to you. And when you're able to weigh what matters to you and put that front and forward, you're going to be able to come back and do what is difficult when you're facing those challenging moments in ambiguity and push that reward pathway forward. Next, take baby steps. Your brain actually really likes baby steps. And that's because every time you experience a success, you actually experience that chemical release that those entrepreneurs are experiencing on their own. And that, again, that chemical release is what causes you to be focused, motivated, experience pleasure, and feel driven to re-experience that emotion. It's a very powerful trigger to the reward side of the brain. And just by setting yourself up for small successes, even if it has nothing to do with your professional life and work, you're setting yourself up to be a risk taker. And at the same token, if you are doing a lot of things that actually set yourself up for failure, you're experiencing the exact opposite. Your brain actually gets drained of dopamine, that chemical, every time you experience a failure. And when you have that drain of dopamine, you're feeling demotivation. You don't feel like coming back and doing it. And so there's a lot of implications as to how any person can just transform the way they work to set themselves up for little successes so that they can actually drive that chemical release and become a better risk taker. Finally, say yes. Yes opens doors. Say yes to just about everything. And inherent in the idea of saying yes is an optimism. It's an optimism that I'm going to do this and it's going to turn out okay. And whatever comes up my way, I'll figure it out. And having that faith that you can eliminate the downsides as they pop up is powerful. It's impulsivity and adaptability all in one shot. And it's going to be enough to drive you to the next leap, and the leap after that, and the leap after that. So we just talked about a couple of ways that you can get a little bit more impulsive in life. The second part of that equation is adaptability. And for adaptability, it's very deeply rooted with your personality. Again, some people are just born like fish that know how to swim when times are tough. But to the adaptable personality, bad decisions and failure are nothing more than problems to be solved and things to be worked around. And at the root of that is a confidence, an optimism, and an ability to be a problem solver. So if you keep your cost of failure low and your agility high, you can put out the fires just like those entrepreneurs with those buckets of water as they pop up along the way. And that's, again, where you want to strive if you're looking to be adaptable. One big way to build adaptability in your life is to have faith. And, you know, it's so easy for us to get caught up in everything that can go wrong in life. Try focusing on what can go right. And, you know, our thoughts and beliefs are powerful. Neuroscientists that research decision-making have discovered that 90% of the decisions we make are actually made by the irrational side of the brain. And while we'd like to think we're in control, we really aren't. And we talked about loss aversion. That loss aversion is so strong. It's the side of the brain that makes you feel fear. It's the side of the brain that makes you think about everything that can go wrong. And if that irrational side of the brain is in control and it is your bias to think about everything that can go wrong, you need to find that equally irrational optimism that makes you charge forward. And that's what entrepreneurs, whether they know they're doing it or they don't know, that's what they do. They find the reason to come back. Lawrence Gonzalez, who's the best-selling author of Deep Survival, actually found that people who pray have better odds of surviving a plane crash than people who don't. And Italian researchers have found that organ transplant victims that sought an intervention from God actually had a higher likelihood of success. Faith is powerful, and it doesn't matter what faith you choose to believe in. Just having faith and that inherent optimism and confidence that comes from it is enough to make any pessimist adaptable and able to deal with what will come next. Next, mind the company you keep. One of the most powerful predictors of whether you will become an entrepreneur is if someone you know found success that way. There's studies out of Babson University that show children of entrepreneurs are much more likely to become entrepreneurs themselves, as are people who just know someone who found success that way. And risk-taking is contagious. So next time you're working on a business idea, think twice about who you seek that advice from, and think twice about who you actually spend time with during those moments where you're trying to encourage yourself to take risks. If you're seeking advice from very intelligent but people who haven't actually been entrepreneurs themselves or taken those risks to help them find success, you might be actually setting yourself up for failure. So risk-taking is very much so contagious. Finally, practice improvising. It's an essential part of developing your entrepreneurial instinct, and it means that you need to get comfortable with ambiguity. I can't tell you how many entrepreneurs that I talked to that started a tiny little business when they were young. Ken Austin, one of the founders of Marquis Jets and Avignon Tequila, actually had a t-shirt business growing up in newspaper routes, and the founder of Cliff Bar, Gary Erickson, was also a jazz trumpeter in high school, and he credits some of his ability to take risks with that improvisational style that he practiced in high school. He would just get up on that stage, not practice anything, and just go at it. And even when he didn't have an ace performance, just the act of getting out there, doing it, and surviving it was enough to encourage him to try it again. And with every moment that you allow yourself to improvise and that the world doesn't fall to pieces and you allow yourself to come back, you give yourself the courage to do it again and again and again. And there's a lot of little ways that you can just do this in your everyday life. For example, pick the first outfit you see in your closet and just wear it. Life will go on. Go to a restaurant, pick the first menu item that your finger lands on. Again, life will move on. And these little everyday steps will make you better at entrepreneurship and make you more adaptable before you know it. So again, if I leave you with anything, I encourage you to push the boundaries of yourself, so much so to the point that you realize it just doesn't matter anymore. And it doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter what your talents are. Instinct is universal. Instinct's available to all of us. And I hope you take the time and find the courage to follow your bliss. If you follow your bliss, you put yourself on the kind of track that's always been there for you all the while waiting. When you can see that, you begin to meet people who are in your field of bliss, and they open doors for you. If you follow your bliss and you're not afraid, doors will open and appear where there once were walls. If you follow your bliss, doors will open for you that wouldn't have opened for anyone else. And that's from Joseph Campbell. So the journey that took me to discover entrepreneurial instinct changed me in profound ways, and I hope it changes you too. Thank you.